Hi, welcome back to Spring CS170. We're into week 6. The last few videos was covering basic concepts around debugging. So as I mentioned before, unfortunately for debugging, it's not like a clear set algorithm that you follow to help you with debugging. So try to give you some general tips essentially or heuristics around debugging. I think the main takeaway from the debugging is just to make sure you know the difference between the compile time, runtime, and logic errors. Um, and then beyond that, you'll probably just get some experience just by playing around with the code as you're doing your assignment. So you'll be able to get a feel for what I was saying before about debugging, right? Number one, I was saying when you do your code, try to test along the way. So implement small sections of the code and then test along the way, doing print statements, or I should say alert statements or whatever, just to see how things go. I know there are certain tools that you can look at that maybe helps you to identify or trace the variables along the way. Um, you can even do it within the browser. The browser will allow you to view the source and different variables and whatnot. But kind of think that might be a little bit too much for this class to really go through. So I think the most simplistic thing to do is really just test it small piece at a time, put in print statements or alerts. I keep on saying print, but alert statements. And if you do end up looking at a big chunk of code, try to make sure the code is organized nicely into different sections so you can comment out different sections to narrow down where the error could be. So as we discussed last time, something like compile time error is probably going to be pretty easy to see what the problem is. Those are probably the easiest things to catch. The runtime will be the next level of difficulty, and then the logic errors are probably the most difficult ones to troubleshoot, right? But hopefully the programs that we're giving you to work on right now are pretty simple, so it shouldn't take you that much time to try to debug it and figure it out. And hopefully the heuristics that we've given you will allow you to troubleshoot them without too much grief. Okay. So a good chunk of this week is really focused on chapter 18, really. So we're getting into JavaScript. Uh, and there's a concept here essentially about event-driven programming, right? So you can see right here at the top, event-driven programming, right? And this idea of event handlers and stuff like that. So you might say, well, okay, what is event-driven programming? So just to give you some context, probably like in the older days, there's just more of this idea of like a procedural language where you might think of it logically. You can look at it from going from the top down, right? So you see something at the top of the screen, you say, okay, I process this, I process this, I process this, and you work your way down the list. And that's kind of the flow of the logic or the code, right? But event-driven programming basically says, uh, you know, here's your GUI, right? Whatever your GUI is, and there's like all these different boxes on there that you might be doing stuff, and you have your mouse. Maybe you're interacting with the mouse, and um, you know, you might do something. Maybe you type in something into a box, or maybe you click on something. Um, I'm keeping it very simplistic, but those are considered events. Okay, so if I change a value in a box, um, that is an event, right? And then I can program code so that when that event happens, that change happens, I do something, whatever it may be. Maybe I pop up like another box and say, oh, please enter this because you left it blank or something like that. So that's generally how you can imagine what event-driven program looks like. Okay, and like I said, you contrast that to something else where it's more like in the old days before you really had sophisticated GUIs or anything like that, where basically you just start from the top of the code and work your way down. You just kind of follow it. So it has its pros and cons. I think uh, when you look at event-driven programming, because you can stick the code anywhere, right? It could be all over the place, right? It could be even in different files and whatnot. It may not be that obvious as to where the code is doing like whatever you're seeing. Maybe there's something weird that's happening. You don't know really where to look sometimes. Um, it takes some experience. It takes certain types of tooling to to really get a good handle on that sometimes. Whereas in the old days, where you just start from the top and you work your way down, it's kind of easy to see what's happening. Oh, in the middle of the page, something happened. So you just kind of look almost in the middle of the code and you can kind of figure out what's going on. So, but, you know, the reality is like these days, especially, you know, where we're at, right, in terms of GUIs and whatnot, um, you know, the event-driven programming is pretty much the current paradigm, I should say. So that's kind of what event-driven programming is, and you know, probably you'll get better off with this as we do more examples and whatnot. We'll walk it through. So I'm going to be doing an example with you shortly. Okay. Now you can see under your resources here. You know, I know it's under your resources here, under your PDF, but maybe I'll just pull that out and put that onto my page so it's in one place. So I'll add that to the resources. You can look at that. And here's your vocabulary stuff here. Okay, so take a look at that. And as usual, you have these little exercises and whatnot. I know some of you have been working on assignment 5. Some good questions are coming across, especially on flowcharts. As I mentioned in the last lecture, be careful, right? Don't try not to ask us specifically for an answer, specifically for the assignment. We're not really supposed to give you that answer, but I guess we can try to give you hints, right? Or try to clarify certain things. So I think we have to be really careful there. But take a look at Piazza. I think I do see some pretty good questions, whether it's related to the exam or it's related to assignment 5. I think it's useful. You might catch some things in there that would help you, right? So I do encourage you to go over to Piazza, and you know, maybe you don't see something there. You don't see something there. You do have a question on, post it up there, and you know, hopefully one of your classmates or one of the professors will jump in and clarify that for you. Okay. Notably, I think people have found some issues with some of the questions from the textbook. Okay. So anyway, I'm not going to spend too much time on that. You have this. I'm going to put this over, right, to my resources, so you can just click on it from there. Okay, so I think that's good. Now let's get back to here. So yeah, you probably saw it when I was looking at the debugging up here, right? So I was doing debugging, and you see this chapter 18 events. I'm going to put that in my resources too, so you can take a look at that, download it. But what it's going to look like is this. Okay. Actually, let me fix this. Just that. Okay. Same thing, right? So this and this, same thing. And so it's your header information here, right? And you can see the style, right? Pretty straightforward. Dodger blue, some font and whatnot. You know, nothing crazy here. It's just more like demonstrating, you know, applying style from the header level. So you remember, which, you know, this is actually going to be on your exam, right? When you apply the styles, you can apply it inline at the HTML on the body side, or you can apply it at the head level, and then that will cascade down. Or you can import a CSS file, right? So those are the 3 different levels. So you go to the lowest level. Let's say you do it inline, you're going to override whatever you had at the top, right? But so this is almost like there's nothing fancy, but it's just a demonstration of you taking in a style at the header level, right? So here's your style, here's your tag, here's what we want in the body, and setting the font size, right? Okay. And like I said, I'm going to save a file for this. You'll get this in a second after I get through this lecture, okay? So here we go, right? We have, this is an important idea here, the idea of text boxes, right? This is where you can punch in text, right? So these are text boxes. This one is you can put stuff in, and this one is read-only. That means the way things are kind of set up, and again, this is really just for this class. This text box is used for display. Now, if you're really kind of doing this type of stuff in the real world, you wouldn't quite do it this way. But I think just from a teaching perspective, teaching the basics, this works fine, right? So you have your text box here, you can write stuff in here. So in this case, we wrote in Fran, and then on output, it takes this hello, and it says hello Fran, okay? And so what does that look like? Here's within the body, right? See this tag, body, body, and then you have all of this stuff here, and you look at this is what I mean by inline, right? So now you can say, here's your font size, text, whatnot, right? So this is inline. This would override if you had something in the body, I mean, not the body, the head up here, right? So whatever I had here can be overridden by whatever I have down here in the body, right? So that's what I mean by having a lower level of override. So here's your text box. Okay, so remember what I said, making it so that it's readable for someone looking at this code. So you have text box, hello, camel case, right? So capital H here, dot value, okay? And on change, that's the event, okay? So let me step back here and just try to go through this in sequence so you can see what we're talking about here. First off, here's the text box. Remember I said you can type stuff in here, okay? So here we set the style, right? So font size, and it's a text, and the ID is the name, okay? So text box name, okay? And then you would say the value. This is what you remember what I said about initializing stuff. So we're initializing it to be blank, right? Value equals to blank. So you refer to this, it's going to be the value, and the value we're setting it to blank, okay? And then size is just the size of the box, okay? Now, on change, like I said, this is the event, right? So I type something, that's a change, right? So I put in like, well, in this case, we're typing in Fran, right? So when I change it to Fran, by me putting in anything, that becomes what they say is an on-change event, okay? When that happens, then you see this quote here, right? This double quotes here. Anything within here is considered JavaScript, okay? Anything out here is considered HTML. I hope people get that idea, what I'm just saying here, right? So JavaScript and HTML are two separate things, right? So HTML is, you know, quote unquote rendering, right? Showing something onto the page, right? It's almost like this, right? Like font size, right? It's the style, right? How does it look, right? But the JavaScript is it actually doing stuff, right? Assigning variables, doing calculations, whatever. That's the JavaScript side of things. So those are two distinct things. I know people get confused on that. They kind of mix those things together. So I'm trying to show you the difference here. So like all of this stuff here, I'm gonna highlight this like this. All of this stuff here, that's your HTML. Once you get this on change event, anything within this double quotes here, this is JavaScript, okay? So in this case, it's very simple, right? Text box hello, which is this. We've named this text box hello, which you see down here, right? Text box hello dot value equals to text box hello dot value plus the text box name, okay? Which is this, right? So this is text box name, right? You remember we called it this here. You see text box name here. So what this is saying is that I want the value of text box hello value, which is it starts off with hello, and I want to add on to it text box name value, okay, which is this, right? So it's, and when you do a plus, remember when we do stuff with a plus sign on text or characters, that's a concatenation. Concatenation means you take, you know, the first set of characters and the second set of characters and put them together. It's not like addition, like arithmetic type of addition, right? 1 plus 1. So try to pay attention to this part, right? So I'm adding the two strings together here, okay? And then, you know, couple of breaks here, and then you have another text box, right? Pretty much the same as the first one, right? So you see all of these different things here. Here's the name. Now here's text box hello, which you can see we refer to over here, right? And then the size 20, and then the value, right? So instead of like here, I initialize the value to be blank. I'm initializing the value to be hello, comma. Okay, so that's one slight difference. Now the other difference here, you can see it's read only, right? The reason why you set this read only because you don't want anyone typing in here. You just want to use this to do a display. So I'm using this to set the value here. So I'm using this box to set the value in this box. Okay, so that's the general idea of how this flows. Okay, now I actually went ahead and started to type all this stuff um, into my HTML5 editor screen so you can see the results right away. Okay, uh, I'm not going to give that to you. That kind of makes it a little bit too easy for everyone, right? So uh, I don't think it's too much for you to type in this stuff. I'm going to show it to you on the screen. You can see it on the PowerPoint, obviously. So I'm not just going to hand you over the HTML file with everything in it, but you should be able to follow it both on the video and on the PDF I'm going to save for you in a little bit. Okay, so my suggestion, back to the point about storing up examples, is for you to type this in yourself and keep it handy for when you want to do your assignments and when you want to study for exam number 2. Right? Remember, I'm saying exam number 2. This is not for exam number 1. Okay, so let me go back to my editor. Here we go. So I already got everything in here. Okay, and I kind of zoomed it in, so hopefully everybody sees it pretty clearly. Okay, so you remember here, I'm going to give you this file up here, so you'll get that in a sec. All right, so typing in JavaScript here, fine, right? And everything I just covered is exactly what you have here, right? You typed it in here, and no different here, right? So text box hello equals the text box hello. The text box is down here, hello, uh, and then you add in text box whatever I type in here, okay? And it's an on change event, okay? And here you do the same thing. You have the text box hello, and you have the hello comma as your initialize, and you have it as read only, okay? Um, yeah, let me try to sync this back up to the slide. I'm going to talk to the slide again and then come back to this code in a second. So I'm going to try to talk this all the way through, then we'll actually try to run this, okay? Okay. So the second type of thing to work with is buttons, okay? Um, there's no need to kind of put this into a separate thing, so I'm not going to put it into a separate thing. So don't have to worry about this. You should just stick it into the same one so you have it all in one place. No need to put it into a separate file here. Okay? And you'll see I did that on the other page. Let me delete this guy here. Right? So this is HTML tag, so you know that. And then here's the next thing that you want to know, button. Right? In this case, we call it button 1. Probably not the best name for a button, but that's fine. I'll go with it for now. And then the value is click me, right? And you can see where that goes to, right? That goes onto the label of the button, right? So the value is click me. And then on click, that's your event, right? So your event for this button is when you click on it, right? And then you'll get an alert, hello world, okay? And so you can see here, I did that, right? So button 1, the label is click me, which is over here. And then you can say on click, say hello, okay? So let let me just do this here. Arnold, and let's see what happened here. Okay. I think this kind of weirded out on me a little bit. Not sure what's going on here. So let me switch this over to the js.do, so hopefully it works better there. Just let me pause this for a second, flip it over to JS.do. Hi, sorry about that interruption there. HTML5 editor flaked out on me a little bit. Like I said, I'm doing HTML5 editor because you can see the results right away, but now I'm just doing js.do, so you can see the results right away. A lot of you are probably using your own editors, saving the HTML file locally, and then bring it up on your browser. That's fine. Like I said, I only use this just because I can see the text on the left side um, and the results on the right hand side. But a lot of you are probably using Notepad++ or using Atom or Visual Studio or whatever. That's fine. It's just a two-step thing for you, right? You have to save it to your HTML file, and then you have to pull it back up into your browser. So anyway, I flipped this over to JS.do, and if you want to do the same thing, so you just type in js.do, and it likes to put in like this script over here at the top. So if you don't see it, just put it in like this. So just leave it be, right? This part is the head, so don't worry about the head, right? That's just kind of setting the color here, and then goes down to here, right? So it's the same code, right? No difference there. It just, I don't know why HTML5 editor flaked out. So let me put Arnold, and you can see it put hello Arnold here, right? And then the click me is this code right here. Okay, so you hit click me, on click, I pop up the hello world, and then I reset this text box, right, to be what it was before. And then I also reset this top part to be blank, this top text box, right? So I hit click me, says hello world, an alert box, and it blanks this out, okay? All right, so sorry for a little bit of interruption there, but I'm not sure what's going on there. So js.do, if you guys want to do the same thing I'm doing. Otherwise, just go into your Notepad++ or Atom or Visual Studio or whatever works for you, and then pull it up into your HTML, I mean into your browser, okay? So you can see the next part is the radio button. So let me get back to my PowerPoint. Where's that at? Here we go. Okay, so we left off on the buttons, and now we're on the radio buttons. Okay, so radio buttons, here's what you need to know with the radio buttons, right? So one idea is that you want to keep all of these together here, right? It's a unit, right? These are just choices within that, right? So note this point here. The radio group must share the same name, so you can keep it as one group, right? And I'll point up to here, right? So you say name equals to fruit, right? So that tells the computer that all of this is together, okay? And then, so what does that mean? That means when you select one, you can only select one. You can't do a multi-select here, right? So that's kind of like the behavior as defined for a radio button. You do one, the others will become blank, right? And I'll show that to you on the browser in a second, okay? Yeah, and you can have as many radio groups as you want on the page. Each one has to have a different name, that's all, right? But within that, each one has to have the same name, right? So like I said, this one is fruit, right? 1, 2, 3, fruit. So the value is apples, bananas, peaches. So you can see apples, bananas, peaches, and you know, A, B, C, okay? So what that means is you clicked on this, this, or this, it's going to be either A, B, or C as the value of this, what you come out, so the rest of the code can read it, okay? Let's go back to my code here. And so you can see here, here, and here. All right, so I click on it, and then it displays the value down here. Okay, so how do I do that? Let's come back to here on the left hand side. So I defined it just like on the PowerPoint, and I said, you know, the first one is apples, bananas, peaches, right? And then when I click on it, right? So I click on this, or click on this, I set this is box, right? Or box 1, and the value is blank. But notice I put the read only again. Same thing as above, right? Same thing here. I'm using this text box for display, so that's why it's read only here. Set the value to be blank. Okay. Now, I kind of did it this way, where you kind of set the value on the click of each one to set the box value to, let's say in this case, peaches, because I selected peaches and it became peaches, right? So box 1 value equals to value, okay? So it's this value here, right? So all within this, it's pretty straightforward for you to take this and click it onto here. That's one way to do it, right? I mean, the other way to do it is to kind of, you know, keep it into a variable and then down here do some processing saying if one of these, then set the box to be whatever value, like apples, bananas, or peaches. Okay, that's another way to do it. So instead of having the processing with the on click, you kind of collect the value coming out of these 3 things and then assign the box value here. You can debate which way is better. It's up to you. Like some people kind of say, well, it's better to have all the logic in the one place over here as opposed to spreading out the logic into each one of the on clicks. You know, I kind of like it like this, so that's my example. Okay. All right. Now the next part is the Fahrenheit to degrees calculation. All right. So let me come back to my PowerPoint, get that synced back up to here. Okay. So yeah, this is extra. I don't need this. Okay. Okay. So what we're doing is we're going to calculate, we're going to do a conversion, Fahrenheit to Celsius. Okay. And, you know, this up here is fine, right? This is like just doing the display of the text. Here's your input, right? We'll call it that value. Maybe that's not a great name either, but we'll go with that. That's blank. And then this is remember the button, right? So the ID is the calculate button. We call it button. Calling the button equals the calculate button, right? That's a pretty good name. And then the value of the button is calculate Celsius, right? The event is on click, right? And then once you have that, you're good to go, right? You have a value here, and then you're gonna say this variable f degrees equals to the number, right? The number that you just typed in, right? And then your Celsius is going to be calculated off of this, right? So you can do f degrees minus 32 times 5 over 9, right? And then you would set the value of the C box dot value equals to this. This is something that you want to take a note of, right? So if you just let the computer do calculations, you'll get like, you know, very long decimals or whatever, right? You probably don't want to do that, right? Typically you want to maybe round it off. In this case, we're going to round it off to 2, okay? So let's see what that looks like. All right, you can see I put in this code here already, okay? So let's go over to here, and let's say, I don't know, 45.7, and you can see what happens here. We calculate it to be 7.61, right? That's what happens when you do this 2 fixed of 2, right? So that's how many decimals you're going to go out. Okay, and again, you can see same thing. We have the text box, C box, read only. So if you look at all of the examples, how we went and displayed the results, either this one, or this one, or this one, they all use the same pattern, right? So this pattern is this, right? Defining a text box, calling it a name, setting it to whatever value you want to set it to initially, and then making it read-only, right? And then there's another place where you actually input data or calculate data, and then use that to set the value of this read-only text box. All three examples that we did follow that same pattern, right? So this important pattern, like I said, in the real world, you might not really do it this way, but I think for the purpose of this class, this is fine. The fact that later on you might actually use like another component to actually represent the value or hold the value, that's another thing, doesn't matter. The idea is still the same. Okay, so anyway, that's what I want you to take away from this lecture, right? I know we've been running this lecture pretty long, but hopefully this gives you some good examples to work with. You're going to be doing this for your assignment, and you're going to be tested on this for exam number 2. So I really do recommend try to really understand how to work with text boxes, how to work with radio buttons, how to work with buttons, and how to display the results in a read-only text box. Right? All of those things are important, and you'll be working with it for your assignments and for your test. Okay. Thank you for your time, and have a good night. Thank you.